Hey,
All right, so I'm gonna try and focus on the 2003 to 2012
sure,
of
sure,
Montreal period here.
sure.
So you joined the band back in 2003. Kevin's married to Nina now,
Yeah,
and yeah. So I don't just start telling me what was it like that 2004? You
right.
just
So
joined back.
I'll try not to go to too much detail. So basically, those in between years when they were in the house, I would still come and hang out,
Uh-huh.
uh, and I would come over and we, they played me Coco Laco and all the other stuff they were doing. And the thing that got me back in the band was actually this band called Great Lakes. I don't know if you know about Great Lakes,
I do
but
not.
so Great Lakes is a band formed by uh, Ben Crum, Dan Donahue, and Jamie Huggins. So Jamie was also playing in Great Lakes at the same time as he was in Montreal, and they were making their own thing, inspired by the whole Elephant Six thing. They had moved from different parts and come to Athens and were doing their thing, and so they were making their own opus. The first Great Lakes record is really good, and it's more like zombies
Mhm.
influenced, and it's it is a great record, and Robert mixed it in Denver and everything. Um, but so they started recruiting other people to play in their group, and so Dottie played in Great Lakes, and Derek played in Great Lakes, and then Kevin was playing in Great Lakes, amongst some other people. Joel Evans, who I mentioned before, who
Mhm.
disappeared from Montreal,
Uh-huh.
he was playing bass before Derek in Great Lakes.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and so I would go over to their house. They had that was the whole idea. Everybody get their own house so they could like record their stuff
Uh-huh.
in, right? And so they had a house, and I would hang out with them all the time. And eventually, Derek decided he didn't want to play bass in Great Lakes anymore. And so they were like, and I'd quit Elf Power in 2001. And so they immediately called me. They were like, BP, you got to play in Great Lakes. And so in 2001, I started playing. I just immediately jumped from Elf Power into playing with Great Lakes. And that was a lot of fun because then I was hanging out with Kevin again all the time. And we had always been
Mhm.
best buds. Um, but then Great Lakes, we went to Europe and Scandinavia in 2001 and played this Swedish festival called Emma Boda. The
And that's
Swedish festival
I
called
saw
Emma
the
Boda.
video from that.
Yeah, well, the Montreal shows. I've got. Here's another thing. I will eventually release all these other videos from Emma Boda. So I've got Great Lakes playing. I've got Gerbils playing. I've got Marshmallow Coast playing. I've got Elf Power playing. We all played, and before that, Nutrimilk Hotel music tapes had played Emma Boda. And it says it's a really special place in our heart is this Swedish festival. Um,
And that's where
so
Kevin met Nina, right?
that's right. So on that tour, so that's how we met because Great Lakes was doing a tour, was going to Emma Boda, and um, uh, in addition to playing the Swedish festival, the organizers had organized a tour for us of playing places in Sweden and in Norway. And so, they got us these shows, they got us the van, the tour, and they gave us like, okay, here's 200, $300, so you guys have got gas money or whatever. You can stay in hostels or whatever. And then Great Lakes, we drove and did this tour, and we went to Oslo. And when we got to Oslo, we met this whole crew that had their own scene, and they had a record label called Perfect Pop. And Nina was in a band with this girl named Ivor, who actually I saw just a couple of months ago in Oslo when I was there. And they had a band called the Ethno Babes. Not
Mm-hmm.
sure if that's a very PC band
Uh-huh.
name or anything. But that's what they're called. Um, and so Nina played bass in the Ethno Babes, and they were all Elfin Six fans, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so we played at this bar called it says Mono, but they pronouncing it Mono, Mono. We played at Mono Club, and they all came out and Nina was there. And I'll never forget, like, Nina is extremely beautiful. And I remember being at soundcheck, we're all kind of loading in. And I remember Nina kind of looking my way. And I'm like, holy shit, the hot babe is like looking at me.
Uh-huh.
And then I realized she's looking just over my shoulder and she's looking at Kevin, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, she's looking at Kevin. And we played the show that night, and actually uh, Kevin and I play some of Montreal songs that I could remember and stuff at the show. And because of Montreal did play that festival, but it was just like a one-off. Like Derek and Andy flew over just for the festival, but they didn't do a tour.
Uh-huh.
So this tour with Great Lakes was how Kevin and I really started to like bond again.
Yeah.
Because they had been living in this country house, which was like a pain in the ass to get to, basically. So I didn't go out there very often, and it was a pain for ass for them to come back into town. So, yeah, he met Nina then, and then I kept playing with Great Lakes, and I would hang out with Kevin all the time. And then eventually Nina came over to the United States to visit, and that went well. And she went on tour, hanging out with Of Montreal when they went on tour. And then eventually they decided to get married. And so Kevin and Nina get married in like 2003, I guess. And they come back, and Kevin's like, okay, well, we can't live in the country house anymore. Let's move back into town. Eric Harris had bought a house and then renovated it, so they were renting from Eric Harris, and they moved back into town, like in like the neighborhood where everybody else lives. And then I just started hanging out with Kevin like every other day, and then we played. Our friends, the Ladybug Transistor, were playing a gig in town, and they'd ask if like Of Montreal would maybe open up. But at this point, Of Montreal was kind of like in this gray area because Kevin and Derek had a fight when they left the country house over the gear. Because it was shared gear. And also Kevin was kind of chafing at Derek being in control of the recording process. He missed doing it himself, right? And at the last days of the country house, Kevin had bought like a little digital 8-track and was like making songs in his own bedroom on his own again. And then I think in his mind, he had so much fun doing that instead of having to like wait for people to get off their jobs to put on a clarinet solo or something or learn the songs, because obviously Kevin's talented enough to play everything himself. So he's kind of like Prince in that way. He can do it all. Even though it is good sometimes to have other people play. So him and Derek had a falling out, and then in his mind, he's like, Derek's no longer in the band, but he hadn't announced this. And anyway, our friends came to town, and we said, oh, we'll just make up a band. So we came up with, we had this band called the Dutch Scrubber, and that was me and Nina and Kevin and Jamie, and Dottie helped out on a few songs. And we had this fun show, and we wrote some songs just for the gig, and we played like, you know, some fun covers that we liked, like the Pretty Things and stuff like that we liked, and had a great time. And then after that, Kevin asked me to be back in the band. And I thought he wanted me to play bass. He's like, oh, no. I want you to play guitar. I was like, oh shit, that would be cool. And then I helped Kevin like figure out some computer shit, and he basically recorded Satanic Panic on his own. Eric Harris played drums on a few songs because he was like next door. And then we formed a band and we went on tour. And I got my friend Jason Neesmith involved because we needed somebody to fill out some parts. So Jason played in the band for that tour. And we started that tour spring of 2004. And, you know, Kevin at that point was kind of like, man, he talked to me. He's like, man, this might be like the last tour I do,
Mhm.
because I probably got to get serious and get a real job. And then it was like a week into the tour, they find out that Nina's pregnant,
Uh-huh.
and they're just like, oh shit, and they're freaking out. And Kevin tells me, and he's like, don't tell the rest of the band. And I said, well, do you want to cancel the tour? And he's like, I don't know what we're doing.
Uh-huh.
And they
And she's
they just
playing bass on that tour, right?
Nina decides that, like, no, 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 let's go ahead and do the tour. And at this point, Kevin's really freaked out because he's like, man, this is it. I'm gonna have to go to get a real job. And
Uh-huh.
because of Montreal wasn't that popular. I mean, at
Uh-huh.
most, I think the previous records, maybe of Montreal, had sold at most maybe 5,000 records, which in the indie
Mhm.
world is not bad, but it wasn't like, the most we were making at a show would be like $300, you
Yeah.
know. And even when Montreal had toured before, I mean, it wasn't like that. There was that many people coming to the shows. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe a good crowd would be 200 people or something like that come to a show. Um, but Kevin lucked out and signed with a record label who, even though they weren't really into pop, they were more into like kind of emo and stuff, polyvinyl. He happened to sign with a record label that did promote the record, and it luckily caught on, you
Uh-huh.
know? And so college radio started playing the record. And we noticed probably like 2 weeks into the tour that all of a sudden people started showing up at the shows. And we were also playing a lot more all age venues, like
Uh-huh.
some kind of semi DIY all age places. And the kids were going crazy.
Uh-huh.
And we were a really good band, and the songs were great. The album is really, really good.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so we became like a really good band. We did like a 7-week tour, which is a long time to tour. I don't recommend you ever do a 7-week tour.
Uh-huh.
It's too long. Um, and as that tour got along, probably like 3 or 4 weeks in the tour, like I think the record was like number 3 on the CMJ charts, which was
Uh-huh.
just like, we had never been on the charts before. Maybe Elf Power had been, but of Montreal had never been.
Uh-huh.
And so it's like, wow, this is happening. All the while, Nina's getting more pregnant. She's not
Uh-huh.
showing, but it's like she's progressing. She almost had a miscarriage in Texas. She almost lost Alibi,
Uh-huh.
and it was really scary. Um, and again, she still didn't want to stop the tour, and she like sat in a chair. And
Uh-huh.
things got a little bit weird towards the end of that tour, because I think we just toured for too long. But after that, it was just like, wow, there's actually hope.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like really just a great tour and real fun. And yeah. And then Kevin started writing the next record, Sound Like Twins.
And
And they
you
went
guys got
to,
that.
and they went to Norway eventually. I'm trying to remember when Nina had Alibi, but they went to Norway so Alibi would be born in Norway, because the Norwegian
Mhm.
government gives you like money
Dual citizenship
for
or
having a kid. Like the kid will
oh,
get like they're very generous with their money because they're like an
mhm.
oil rich nation, so they can
Yeah.
like. So it was very, so anyway, they did that. And yeah, and then Kevin had Sunlonic Twins kind of ready to go right after Alibi was born. And then we went on tour for that, and it was even better, right? And just kept on
You guys
progressing
got
from
that
there.
that Outback commercial.
Well, okay, so that was, I remember this day. So I remember uh Kevin being late to practice one day, and we're like, what the fuck, where the fuck is Kevin, like. And then
Mhm.
Kevin, I call him or something, and he's like, oh man, it's this crazy thing. uh there's this commercial, maybe wants to, people want to use one of my songs for a commercial. Like, I'll let you know. I got to deal with this first, though. I've got to fax something. And he comes into practice and he tells us all about it. And then he talks to me later. He's like, man, I don't know what I just did. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, they were putting a lot of pressure on me. He's like, I got an email last night from this woman from this advertising agency saying, yeah, we want to give you, a sizable amount of money for this Outback Steakhouse commercial or whatever, which he's like, eh. And stuff like this has happened before. Like we've all gotten like emails from somebody claiming they were going to do something for it, and nothing would ever, you'd never hear from them again or whatever. You're just like, well, I don't know. I don't know what the fuck that was. Well, then this woman calls the next day to Kevin right around, we're having band practice, like, okay, I'm talking to the board. They're all into it. You just got to sign this now and send this to us by 5 o'clock. So because you send me this thing, like, he's like, well, maybe I should have like a lawyer look at it. They're like, there's no time. You got to sign this thing and send it in. And okay, his wife is, maybe Nina hadn't had the baby, Albie, yet, but she was like about to have the baby. So he's like, and then at this point, we're still not making money, even though Sun Like Twins had been, not Sun Like Twins, Satanic Panic was like a successful record, quote unquote. It wasn't like there was like money really.
Yeah.
So for him to be like, well, I could get, a sizable amount of money, but it wasn't, I mean, in the grand scheme, it wasn't like life-changing money, but it would help, right?
Yeah.
He's like, they kind of like quickly was like, yeah, just fucking do it. Just do it. He didn't read the contract. He just signed it. He sent it in. And then he regretted it big time afterwards because, they didn't even use the actual song. They just had somebody that sounded like Kevin. Let's go back tonight. Life will still be there tomorrow. And then like when there's like holidays, they would like do it for Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever. And they had the right to keep renewing this every year. Now he did get some money every year that they renewed it, but he had no control on how to stop it. And it was a successful ad campaign, so it just went on for like 3 years or more. And of course, like, fans were upset. We'd have people coming to the gigs like Outback Steakhouse banners in the crowd, mocking us. And we never played that song afterwards. Like we just would never play that song. Yeah. And only if we went to like Europe or something like that, where like people didn't know about Outback Steakhouse. It kind of just ruined the song for us, Yeah, so that was a big regret, but that was, I mean, I didn't blame him or anything, and of course, but it was a lesson,
So then I think in 2007, Hissing Fauna comes out, and I think it's like Pitchfork called it like the 60th best record of like the entirety of the 2000s. What was like that like for you? Because that was like when y'all like really,
Well, that certainly was like probably the pinnacle for sure. I mean, that record was really hard though, because that was Kevin and Nina's marriage was like basically collapsed in the middle of him making that record. Because when you're on the road, it's funny. There's this movie called Walk Hard. Have you seen this? John C. Reilly. No. It's a funny movie. Anyway,
it's he's like a singer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have seen that.
Yeah, it's kind of like he's supposed to be kind of like Johnny Cash or something like this.
Yeah.
But there's a scene in there that's really funny because it's like he's calling from the hotel room to his wife. He's got the baby and she's all alone. And so how's it going? He's like, oh, honey, it's, nothing's going on. But in the background, there's like an orgy happening in the hotel room and stuff like that. And he's doing drugs and stuff like that. No, we weren't doing that, but it was that kind of thing where like, he's got to call home. Oh shit. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. My phone, it'll be fine. My phone gave me a little battery warning, but it'll be fine. It's like Nina's at home. She really would rather be out playing and touring, but she's got to like take care of the baby. Right.
Yeah.
And so tensions started then, and I won't go into like the details, but Kevin's kind of like losing his mind because he's like, okay, on one hand, I've got a wife who's really unhappy, who really would prefer me to be at home. But at the same time, this is like everything I've dreamed of happening with
Yeah.
my career. To finally, it's happening. And he kind of like lost his mind, so to speak. And definitely like, I mean, I won't go into the whole thing, but like, he really, so like when he created that character of Georgie Fruit,
Uh-huh.
at that point, even though, yeah, he's apologized for it since then, but like, from being like just like a bunch of appropriation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But he was trying to like in his head go someplace that wasn't him,
Yeah.
that he could somehow escape being himself, because it was just his whole, there was no right answer for him. He could either stay home or he could go on tour or do things for the music. And so he kind of towards the end of that record, and then they had split up as well. So like his marriage had fallen apart. She went back to Norway with Alibi. He was crushed. I mean, so the past is the grotesque animal that came out of like his whole marriage falling apart.
Uh-huh.
And you know, and then yeah, that's one of the songs I play guitar on. But it's that was really heavy, surreal period in his life, and so maybe that's why that record resonates with people too, and definitely that song resonates with people, right? So um because that was like him just being like, everything's fucked,
Yeah.
everything is fucked,
Yeah.
everything's fucked.
They made up after his Symphona was released, right?
What's that, right?
They made up after his Symphona was released, right?
Sure, yeah. After his Fauna, then eventually, after like 6 months or more, can't figure out how long it was, he started to. They started to communicate again, and then he went to Norway to kind of hang out and be near her, and he needed to be near his kid. I mean, that was the other thing too. Say they hadn't gotten back together, he still was going to have to like figure out like, shit, my kid's in Norway. I'm gonna have to figure out, even just to be near and be in my kid's life. Norway's really fucking expensive.
Uh-huh.
Like even if they hadn't gotten back together, I'm not saying that was his motive for getting back together. I mean, I think he wanted to repair things, of course, but like, he had to like figure that out and take responsibility as a even just as a father, to be near his kid. And yeah, they were able to patch things up. But it was a rocky road for them. But Nina is so brilliant, and definitely was. I think his new person in his life, Christina. I don't know her very well, but she seems very, very smart and very cool as well. But Nina definitely was. You could see that, like, okay, who could hang like intellectually and artistically with Kevin, like, and Nina could, right? So they were a great couple. And Nina's still in Athens. I saw her recently. She's doing all right. She's all right. Alibi's doing great. So yeah.
Does Kevin still live in Athens, or?
Yeah, he's still here.
Okay.
He's still here.
Do you guys ever run into each other?
Not really. I could have run into him about a week ago. He came to a show actually here, because it was one of Christina's like cousins or something played in a band that played here, and so he came to check them out. And I was going to come down just to hang out, so I would have run into him here, but I haven't. We occasionally text, but yeah, I haven't. I don't know the last time I saw Kevin. It's been a while.
So y'all are just like acquaintances, kind of these days.
I'd say it was a cordial, but we don't get into the stuff that we probably need to get into to like repair our relationship that went sideways. But that's like a whole nother thing I don't really want to talk about. I totally respect Kevin, and I treasure those days that we had together, and
Mhm.
but especially the early days. So when I hear those early recordings, um, man, I remember those times that just so fondly, you know.
Mhm.
But he's always going to do what he's always going to be making art and doing his thing. And
Mhm.
there's no one that does anything like his stuff. I mean, love or hate of Montreal, but you have to admit that it's unique and it's uniquely
Yeah,
of
for sure.
Montreal, right?
Um, I know like I guess like during that peak era from like 2007 to like 2012, y'all were like pretty big. Like y'all collab with like Solange, Janelle
Yeah,
Monae. I'm sure you got to meet them all.
right.
You know, what
Yeah,
was
we
that
hung
like?
out. We were good friends with Janelle in her band. Um Janelle, somewhere there's an unreleased version of me playing some outrageously shredding guitar, doing a cover of Moon Age Daydream with
Mhm.
Janelle singing. Um, that we talked about that coming out, but it never did. It needed some work, but it was a fun thing. Um, yeah. So there was stuff like that. I have like my own opinion, like of things we could have done better around that time, just
Mhm.
to promote it, because we were hoping that maybe we could break open to like a
Uh-huh.
larger audience, you know. But I think we should have done a video either with Janelle or Solange in the
Mhm.
video, but it never happened, uh, just because no one got it together. It wasn't like they
Yeah.
said no; they would have done it. It's just I don't know. It just didn't. There's a lot of things that I felt that it wasn't necessarily our fault, but like since we were doing everything on our own by ourselves, we didn't have the wherewithal to get certain things done probably how they should have been done.
Mhm.
You know, it's not anybody's fault, but it's kind of like I do view that time period as a little bit of a missed opportunity,
Yeah.
because I think that record, um, False Priest, I don't know if fans really like that record, but for
I
me,
I I think like the John Brion production. I don't know. It's like a little bit of I don't know how to like describe it. Like
right. I understand that. I understand that. I mean, I mean, well, that was kind of a breaking point for a lot of stuff in the band during that time period, which I won't go into. But yeah. Anyway, I was gonna go out to be in the studio with Kevin for that record in LA, but I was gonna have to pay my own way, and I was like,
mhm.
so I almost was gonna have to call Kevin's bluff and just show up, but I didn't. But a part of me is like, I should have just showed up. But it was like a real passive aggressive thing.
Yeah.
But I did love a lot of those songs, and I really love the song that Janelle sang on. You wouldn't really know it's her singing on necessarily, but I think that song
Mhm.
is just brilliant. So there's a lot of songs on there, and it's that kind of funky, soulful thing that Kevin's into. I mean, I was really into, and I was really
Mhm.
turning Kevin on to as much of that stuff as because I've always been into that. So we really bonded on that stuff, whether it was like Curtis Mayfield or just whatever.
Mhm.
Um, um, so I think a lot of those songs were really fucking cool, but I think for the Montreal fans, it was not like mm.
Yeah. I'll say I think Parallax Stops is one of my top three of Montreal records personally.
Yeah, that one's a pretty crazy one.
Like
My
Malefic Dowry, I love that song.
yeah,
Ye Renew the Plaintiff. You know,
right. Well, that's
uh,
Kevin stretching out, and definitely another one of him going inside of himself and kind of having kind of a splintered psychotic
yeah.
kind of thing going on where he's trying to add a lot more dissonance into what's going on, and that's how Kishibashi got involved,
Mhm.
because we had met Kishibashi at some festivals and stuff, and knew that Kay, could do string arrangements and stuff like that. Um, and so that's how Kay got involved. And
Mhm.
then yeah, we got Dobby into the band, and then we also had another guy playing sax and stuff like that. So we kind of augmented the band. And Davey had started, the band kept evolving. Once Jamie wasn't in the band anymore, and we kind of went through a series of bass players. Then
Mhm.
then Davey Pierce started playing bass, and then Davey brought in Clayton as a drummer after Jamie left, and Clayton's like, he's just amazing. Um, so yeah, the band started to augment and become more like, you know, as it
Yeah.
progressed out, once Dottie and I weren't in the band anymore, it's kind of like you can kind of see it going that way. Um, but yeah, I thought those songs were very interesting. It was very challenging. I think there was a lot of in the band itself. There was a lot of weird tension.
Yeah.
Uh, but
I feel like
you
that
know,
record, I could appreciate it because like it was kind of like the end of an era for the band. I feel.
it is, and it's been interesting for me. When I was in it, I had like really mixed feelings about the whole thing. Um, but my best lady friend, as I call her, the girl I've been dating in Berlin, that's her favorite record is Paralytic
Mhm.
Stalks. She that's her favorite, and she like really wishes she had seen that tour. And there's a couple of live things I found from that, and I was like, yeah, this is really cool. Um, but yeah, but that's getting closer towards the end of my time, you know. But I look back on that and those songs and stuff and be like, that's wow. It's because it's really melding some really harsh, not
Yeah.
harsh, but like dissonant and kind of like these weird kind of splintered things that are just kind of like
Yeah.
shining like dark light,
Yeah.
like fragmented stuff in there. Yeah.
Um. So yeah, did you perform any of like the Lousy with Sylvan stuff, or?
No, I mean we talked about it. So basically, then at the end of the Parallax Stocks, I guess, time period, it's hard for me to gauge because there was like some other EP that kind of came out of Parallax Stocks that we played stuff from that, like I guess that song like Lodge Door and
This is
some
the
other
Rebecca
stuff.
Cash stuff, or?
Well, then Rebecca was kind of like Kevin's
Okay.
new muse. And this is
Uh huh.
like Nina and Kevin were like kind of breaking up, and then Rebecca was hanging out. It was all getting weird.
Uh huh.
It was getting weird. And also in the back of my mind, I knew that it made sense for Kevin to find a new band. Uh, anyway, there's certain things that because it is kind of a weird thing when you're in a band from the beginning and it's everything is equal, right? And then it moves into a thing where like it becomes that it's obviously not equal anymore. It's tough on the people that were there from the beginning instead of hiring people as hired hands to
Mhm.
be in the band. And it was kind of moving in that direction. And so I think overall the reason that I wasn't in the band anymore was one, I was losing my own mind, and I don't know if I was happy being in the band.
Mhm.
Um, but there are a lot of things that I did love about it, obviously. Um, but yeah, things got really weird with Nina and his relationship, and then Rebecca was there, and it just got a little bit weird. But we initially talked about Kevin had said, "Oh, I'm going to form this new band. I'm going to give it a different. It's not going to be of Montreal. It's going to be this other band. I want it to be more like the band and
Mhm.
Dylan. And I'm going to do this record because he felt constricted by what of Montreal had kind of become, you know,
Mhm.
and what maybe fans expected. So he was thinking like he couldn't do that under the of Montreal banner, And I
Mhm.
was totally fine with it because I really needed to do my own thing anyway.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, let's take a year off. No fucking problem. Let's do that. And, I think he did originally seriously intend to do that. But then once he found out that he couldn't do a tour and get paid as much if he was under a different band name than it was of
Uh-huh.
Montreal, and the record company didn't want him to do it like that, then it became of Montreal.
Uh-huh.
And I initially was supposed to maybe play like some guitar on like one or two songs or something.
Mhm.
Um, but that just it didn't happen. And yeah, that's when things got a little bit even more sideways in our relationship. I mean, technically he said he would give me a call when it was ready. I'm still waiting on the call. you know.
You
So I
never
mean,
know. Like,
there was no breakup. It was just like, oh yeah, let's I'll
yeah.
give you a call next year. Still
Yeah.
not gotten this call. So there,
Yeah.
that's kind of how it petered out, I guess. Um, yeah.
All right. So we're about to come up on time here. Obviously, Elephant Six, of Montreal, of Power, like it's like a very like devout cult following, and like I don't know, like you kind of have like a legacy of sorts.
Mm,
What do you make of that? Like looking back, because you've been playing music for like 30 years now, you know.
yeah. I don't know. I'm thankful for one. I'm thankful that I found all these like-minded people to play with and to be friends with. I mean, I think the thing that I'm most thankful about is just the friendship, you know, um, because outside of Kevin, and even though I wouldn't say we're not like
Yeah.
enemies or anything, but I'm still really close with everybody in our scene,
Uh huh.
and it's very loving and inclusive. Kevin, well, I don't want to speak for him, but he said it before where he kind of feels like he's moved on, you know,
Uh huh.
to a degree. But I'm just thankful uh, to have all these great friends and to have made music and because tons of other people in different scenes, they don't find these people. They don't
Yeah.
find people that want to do it with them and are committed to doing it, and or just living poor. Um, so I'm just really thankful, and I'm thankful for the fans. I mean, one of the things with Up Montreal that I was always super grateful
Hmm.
for was that every time I went on tour, the fans would just be so great. And whatever internal drama might be happening behind the scenes, whenever I saw the fans, that made it all worthwhile to me.
Hmm.
Um,
It's like a
and
minute and
so
a half.
I'm very thankful for that. Uh,
We have like
yeah.
one more minute. Is there anything else you would like to say?
Um, I'd say that I hope that Elephant Six and Of Montreal and Elf Power and Nutrimilk Hotel and the Olivias and everybody else, um, that it is hopefully an inspiration, and I know it has been an inspiration for people to make art and to form these little collectives and find your own scene and find people to collaborate with and to have a dream and to create your own world, and that's okay. And it's it's good for you, and it's good for your friends, and it's good to make art because someone else might really identify that with what you're doing and make a difference in their lives. And we obviously did, you know. And we kind of knew we were doing it at the time too. We felt it. We
Hmm.
felt like we were in this utopian love dynamic,
Uh-huh.
just knew, we just felt it,
Great.
but I think it's out there if you look for it.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's about to end the call because I can't go over 40 minutes. But
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you for the interview once again. I'm gonna call you after it ends. But yeah.
Oh yeah, cool. All right, sounds good, Jose.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, see you, man.
Bye.